You're listening to the best of the bravest. Interviews with the FDNY's elite. You know, it's funny how things come full circle because volume 1 of the best of the bravest, about a couple of years ago now, was with a Squad 270 guy, charter member of Squad 270. And tonight, volume 37, and look how far this miniseries has come, is with somebody who's also a charter member of Squad 270 when it was first formed back in 1998. More on that in a second, but welcome back to episode 245 of the Mike the New Haven podcast. We're on the march to 300. It's our second show back. If you haven't checked out the previous episode, that was with Jay Jonas. That was volume 36 of the best and bravest. Very good interview with him. I felt a little rusty, but you guys were good with me. You bared with me while the chief and I had an interesting conversation about a career that spanned 43 years in the FDNY, and when you consider and take into account his volunteer experience prior, 50 years in the fire service, half a life, which is amazing. Of course, we have our sponsors. It's a new era for the Mike the New Haven podcast. First, I know this guy. He's pretty good. He's the best of the sponsors. Here he is. Need advice on how to start your podcast? Frustrated with the editing process? Can't find a voiceover guy? Hi, I'm Mike Colón, and I'm here to help. I'm the owner and founder of MC Media Editing Services, your premier consulting company for all things media, where I can offer you consulting advice on how to get started, and once you get started, editing, as well as voiceover work, all for a very reasonable price. If you want to reach me, you can contact me at 917-781-6189 or the email that you see listed here. I'm always available, and I'm always willing to help. Again, 917-781-6189. Why go to some giant consulting firm that's going to charge you an arm and a leg when you can just come to me? If you want to be stress-free, the way to go is to call MC. MC Media Editing Services, your premier consulting company. Of course, that's my latest endeavor, opening up my own consulting company. And now for a word from my friend Joe Murray. If you're ever caught on the wrong end of the law, call Joe Murray. Joe's a retired NYPD police officer turned criminal defense attorney. With 15 years of experience in the NYPD from 1987 until 2002, he parlayed a successful career in the NYPD into an equally successful career as a criminal defense attorney. His website is jmurray-law.com, where you can reach him at 646-838-1702, or just email him at joe@jmurray-law.com. Well, that is if you need a defense attorney, of course. And here now is the ad for our newest sponsor. And this is if you need a PI. The Mike the New Haven podcast is proudly sponsored and supported by the Ryan Investigative Group. If you need an elite PI, look no further than the Elite Ryan Investigative Group, which is run by retired NYPD detective Bill Ryan, a 20-year veteran of the department who served the majority of his career in the Detective Bureau, most notably in the Arson and Explosion Squad. So if you need a PI to handle anything from fraud, legal services, and anything else that you might require, contact Bill at 347-417-1610. Again, 347-417-1610. Reach him at his website or the email that you see here. Again, if you need a PI, look no further than Bill Ryan and the Ryan Investigative Group, a proud supporter and sponsor of the Mike the New Haven podcast. Bill, of course, also the co-executive producer and creator of Tales from the Boom Room, profiles of the NYPD's Arson, Explosion, and Bomb Squad. And last note, of course, before I introduce my guest, Super Chat, if you want to contribute there, and super thanks for later on. But enough of that palaver. Let's get this show on the road with my next guest, who for 40 years has been a member of the fire service, 31 of them with the New York City Fire Department, after 9 years with the East Farmingdale Volunteer Fire Department, who he's still with, by the way. He hasn't left them. It'd be in 1992 that he joined the New York City Fire Department, where in his 3 decades, he's certainly climbed the ladder, going as high as currently Chief of Safety, and that is the current Chief of Safety of the FDNY, who joins me for Volume 37 of the Best of the Bravest, interviews with the FDNY's elite, Mr. Frank Leeb. Chief, good to have you this evening. Welcome.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Who was guest number 1 from 270?
That was Ray Seeley. Seeley. Yeah, who is he?
Daddy.
Yeah, Fat Daddy himself.
Yes, the impact that man has had on my career, like so many others. But yeah, good. Ray's one of the best.
Oh, absolutely. A great guest. He's been on the show a couple of times. So we'll get right into it, of course. Did you grow up in East Farmingdale?
Well, I grew up in West Babylon. Okay. West Babylon has part of the fire district covers part of East Farmingdale Fire District is in West Babylon Township. That's how that works out. But
any family on the job?
What was that?
Sorry, any family on the job?
No family on the job. Nope, not in the FDNY. Family in the volunteer fire department.
Okay, so that was what. I didn't mean to cut you off. My apologies. That was what kind of initiated your interest in the fire service, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, when I was 7 years old, my older brother joined the volunteer fire department, and he took me there all the time, and that was just something I always wanted to. I always wanted to be a firefighter, and then after East Farmingdale, like you mentioned, I'm still in East Farmingdale. I went on to be a part of the FDNY. Unfortunately, my brother passed away when I only had a couple of years on the FDNY. He was only 36 when he passed away. So, but he instilled all of this, and I would not be a firefighter if it wasn't for my brother introducing me to the amazing profession, the brother and sisterhood of the fire service.
Oh, of course, and you kind of touched on it there, and we can get into it as we go along tonight. You see that brotherhood and sisterhood in effect when there's hard times, whether they be hard times for the department or hard times for member personally. I'm sure that when that happened in your life, that brotherhood was on full display for sure.
Always, we're always there. I mean, like you mentioned, we're there for each other through thick and thin, for better or worse. In the fire service, you can always count on the brothers and sisters. No one fights alone. Nobody goes alone. It doesn't matter whether they lose a family member, whether they're battling cancer, mental health illness, or it's just good times. We just celebrated Medal Day not too long ago, and the brothers and sisters came out in force to celebrate on that day.
Yeah, of course. And of course, today was also promotion day, I believe. About 80 members of the service were promoted and some civilian employees too. 100 in total, 80-20, which is also great to see them being recognized for their hard work. Doesn't matter what bureau you're in, whether it be Bureau of Fire Investigation, Bureau of EMS, or of course the FDNY as a whole. Good work is good work, and it's always great to see it recognized. So 83 is when you get on. And you were about what, 16, 17 at the time?
Yeah, so I was actually in East Farmingdale. You can join, well, at the time you could join when you were 14 years old and be what's called a junior firefighter. And that junior firefighter program is a feeder for when you become a regular or senior firefighter. And now you could I think you could join at 12 years old in my department. Yeah. And so you're not doing a lot of firefighting activity, in the younger age of that, but you get called out to working structural fires and help pack hose and learn about building construction. I mean, it's an amazing program because you're also exposed to and see all the different professions that others do, right? You see people that work at 2 jobs, 3 jobs. They do whatever they got to do to support their family, and they still find time to volunteer, which I've always been in awe of those people that find the time to be as dedicated as they are to serving their communities. And it's why I've continued to do it. I'm not always as active as, there's ebbs and flows. Sometimes you're more active than other times. But everybody gives what they're able to give.
Yeah, of course. It's a big commitment, and it really showcases the love for the job when you consider they're doing it for free. That they're not being paid a penny in these volunteer departments to do it. It's simply, as the old saying goes in sports, for love of the game. In this case, the game involves helping others and saving lives.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yep.
So, 9 years in East Farmingdale originally, pre-FDNY, like I said, you're still there. And you get onto the FDNY in 1992. When did you first take the test?
I took the test right out of high school. So I graduated high school in 1987, probably in the best shape of my life. You had to be at least 18 years old to take the test. I think I was like 18 and a half. And then even when I took the physical test, like I said, I was in the best shape of my life. I did well on the written test, and then I did really well on the physical part. And then in 1992, I got the letter saying that we'd like to appoint you as a probationary New York City firefighter, October of 1992. Yeah.
Wow. So you're coming on during that time when guys that were working during the war years were still on, so you still had some guys from that era that were still working in the fire department. And they, I imagine, taught you a lot, along with other people that, in addition to their fire service experience, as I talked about with Chief Jonas, maybe they had military experience too. What were some of the best lessons that still stick with you to this day from your time in probationary school?
Yeah, so that's a really great point. We had some of the probationary fire school instructors were just amazing. I remember our drill instructor, Lieutenant McJunkin, was just he would abuse you, right? He would abuse you in during probie class. But I remember we had a nor'easter in December of '92, and they took our class and brought us to firehouses. And when they did that, while we were probies, before we graduated, and I had the pleasure of working a night tour with him, and you can see he loved us and cared deeply for us, and that was why he was so demanding during probie school. He was like we were only like a week or two from graduating, and there was some flooding in different areas. I wound up working in a firehouse in Queens that night. Like I said, he was my lieutenant for the night, and you could see he was like a proud father of his probies, because it matters. It really matters that you're prepared, and he took that responsibility incredibly serious to training his people. And it was just, that was probably the realization of our probie school instructors. My first realization is that, wow, yeah, they were hard on us, and now they've become, I was like his friend at that firehouse, that night. And then when I would graduate probie school, Steve Humaninski, who was another instructor at probie school, he was in my battalion. He was assigned to Engine 283 in Brownsville. And I would see him, and it was so humbling when you would go on a run and you'd see him, and he would come over to you and talk to you and ask you how you're doing. And he was another instructor who was very hard on us. But looking back, I understand why they were hard on us. And as my time in training as both the chief of the fire academy and then the chief of training, I understood the value of our instructors making sure that our probies are the best trained, the best that they can possibly be, because it matters on game day. It matters when you go out the door, because those that we're sworn to protect are relying on us being competent and having the ability to get the job done regardless of what we're called to do. And that doesn't matter if you're a firefighter, if you're a police officer, if you're in EMS. The public wants competent people coming. And that's why those academies are incredibly difficult, because in New York City, we have world-class firefighters, police officers, EMTs, and paramedics. And that's not by accident. That's because of the rigorous training programs that we have to prepare us for our first day on the street, in the firehouse, or on that medical call.
Right. Simple as that. And you know what? Again, and this gets said all the time. I've had guys say it to me on my program. I've heard guys on Getting Salty talk about it. If you can't handle the heat, so to speak, in the fire academy, when they're drilling you on every last detail, even if you feel it in a moment, at least that it may be minute, how are you going to handle the fire floor? How are you going to handle the medical call? How are you going to handle the building collapse? How are you going to handle the MVA, and so on and so on and so forth? To where you're right, tough men and women, breed some of the best firefighters this city has ever seen. And tough instructors like that were only tough because, as you said, it wasn't coming from a place of malice. They didn't wake up saying, I want to make this probie's life miserable as I can today. It was to breed the best. It was done out of love. It's the epitome of tough love.
It is done out of love. It really is. If you love your people enough to make sure that you're training them to the exact high bar that we need them to be at, to build that competency, to build that capacity, to where they're ready to go. And it's hard to understand that when you're going through it during probie school. But right. The longer I've been in this job, in this profession, that I realize that when you show up and you know what to do, and everybody that you're working with knows what to do, it matters. And it equals lives saved for the people we're sworn to protect. And it also results in less injuries and deaths of our first responders. Again, all of our first responders, because they're all well trained.
Mm-hmm. Of course, I liken it to the analogy of a basketball team, right? You have the point guard. What's his role? Shooting guard, small forward, power forward, center. Look at the Denver Nuggets. I use that. It's appropriate. They just won their first NBA championship the other night. Yeah, their best player is their center, Nikola Jokic, but they were able to win a championship and be cohesive throughout their run to that championship. Why? Because the point guard did his job, as did the shooting guard, as did the small forward, as did the power forward. Are their roles different? Yeah, but it's all working towards the same goal. And the fire service is certainly no different.
Teamwork, teamwork, teamwork. And boy, is that guy not the most humble person, right? I mean, after the game, before he celebrated, right, he went over and shook the hand of every Miami Heat player and then celebrated and spoke about the teamwork and his teammates. Just incredible. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're talking with current FDNY Chief of Safety, Frank Leeb, here in the Mike the New Haven podcast. Big interview to get. Been wanting to get Chief Leeb on the program for a while. More with him in a second, but I did want to shout out all of you in the live chat tonight. I'm happy to see, of course, Bill Ryan of the Ryan Investigative Group, a big sponsor and supporter of the show. Dawn Marie, Christian Williams, Pete Pranzo, retired NYPD street crime lieutenant. Joe Maliga, I think I mentioned you once. I'll mention you again. Howard Blank, retired NYPD Taru detective. Hopefully I get Howard on the show soon. Brian Keller's here. Scotty, I see you. Darren Phillips is here. Tankamus Prime, of course. Raquel Pranzo, if I mentioned you, I'll mention you again because I love you that much. And Mike Thomas. And like I said, guys, if you have a question, try to put it in the super chat. And when it's appropriate, I'll get to it. So that brings us to engine 323 in 1992. Mill Base in Brooklyn. And Brooklyn, still regarded as the borough of fire at this time. And it's not just the fire calls. It's, the calls of violence, unfortunately. A lot of shootings, a lot of stabbings. Crime was very high around this time. It was right before broken windows policing came into effect and helped clean up the city. So listen, even though Proby School was definitely tough and you had hardcore instructors, that Mill Base in Brooklyn in the early 90s, New York City, how much of an eye-opener was that for you?
Well, so just going to my first firehouse was an eye-opening experience, and 323 engine is part of the 5-8 battalion, and that battalion has great companies that work in it's 257 and 170 in Canarsie, that is 310 and 174 in East Flatbush. I mean, you talk about and 283 engine in Brownsville. So I would actually catch a decent amount of work on details within my battalion, and the senior firefighters and members that were around were just, it was a change, right? Coming from Long Island, it was definitely a change of pace for me. Our first engine in 323 was a Mack engine. I see someone's asking a question about Mack engine.
Thomas. Let me highlight his
question. So we did still have Mack engines. In the volunteer department, our last Mack engines that we had were 1980 Macks, where our department purchased 4 of them at one time. And then after NFPA 1500 came out, that's the standard on safety for the fire service. And that was where you could no longer ride the back step, the tailboard of the engine. And they were converted in East Farmingdale to where we didn't ride on the back, but they enclosed the cab. So we went from having an engine that could put 8 people on to an engine where you can put 6 people on, because you could put 4 on the back step. You could no longer put, you can only put 4 on each side on the jump seats, and then 2 in the front. And then in New York City, we just wouldn't ride on the back step. We had it where they were enclosed positions, but it was still a Mack, but it was enclosed, and it was the end of the Macks. That was definitely the era of the Mack engine in New York City was coming to a close.
They still had them, because for those of you that are watching on YouTube, as Tank just pointed out in the chat, the background here is 288's first rig when they were first converted into a squad in 1998. So you guys, because I remember years ago, I remember seeing 9/11 first responder videos of all the apparatus pulling in. There were still some Macks in service as late as 2001.
Oh, sure. I mean, so a frontline apparatus in New York City is a frontline apparatus for 10 years, and then it goes into a reserve status or backup when a rig is out for another 10 years. So it would take 20 years from the first purchase of a rig for it to no longer be in service in New York City.
Okay,
so you can easily see a rig on 9/11 being a Mack engine.
Yep, quite a few of them were that responded that day, and we'll talk about that day a little bit later. So I'll ask you about your first fire. Again, Brooklyn, there's still a lot of work going around during this time. Do you remember your first fire with the FDNY?
Yeah, I do. I had my first actual fire was a boat fire. And I remember that it wasn't too exciting. We extinguished it, no big deal. But I remember my first two serious structural fires, and one was on Ryder Avenue in Brooklyn, and we had a hose line and went up to the second floor, and it was a child who had gone in to get their pet, and then the father went in to get the daughter, and the father didn't make it out. I believe the daughter made it out. I don't recall, but just a horrific scene. She was an all-star softball player, and just the whole thing. So I'll never forget that. And I had actually, when we went to the second floor, I actually came upon the victim, and then the truck removed would wind up removing the victim, and then one of the largest fires of my career, I would have early on in February of 1993, and that was Kings Highway and Avenue D, an H-type building that had fire out many windows on multiple floors, and it sent many people to the burn center. And my captain that day, Captain Gene McGowan, was with me. He did an amazing job, and I remember crawling down the hall, and I know my ears are burning, and it reinforced teamwork to me for sure. That there I was, going down the hall. It wasn't up to me if we were going to leave, and we made our way down the hall. We eventually put the fire out. When we came out, my ears were burned. The captain's ears were burned, and he eventually went to the hospital. And I went back to quarters. They gave me some Silverdine. I took a couple of tours off. People worked for me, and then I was, as a probie, wasn't going sick. That's for sure. But before he left the scene, he made sure that he taught me what he could from that fire. We reviewed that fire. Coming down that day, a member of Rescue 2 passes me in the stairwell, and he says, "Hey, what'd you think of that?" I said, that was pretty wild. Here I am wide-eyed. I'm like, whoa, I haven't seen something like that. And he goes, "That's a 10-year fire. You could go 10 years and never see a fire like that." And I'm like, thank God. And he was right. But one of the earlier questions you asked was lessons that I learned. And so Captain Gene McGowan, I learned a couple of things from him. The two most important lessons that I learned from him in 323 was learn something from everybody you meet. Sometimes you'll learn what not to do. Sometimes you'll learn what is best to do. And I have done that throughout my career. And the other thing that I learned was, he said, read something fire related every day, every tour that you can. And with the exception of a couple of months following September 11th, to this day, I still do that. I still read, but now with podcasts and the availability, you could read or listen to something every day. So today I'm reading the book, The Speed of Trust. And I'm in the middle of, I'm listening to that. And I'm listening to that because I just read The Wisdom of the Bullfrog by General McRaven. And he references that book. He references The Speed of Trust in it. So now I have to read that book. So it continues. And so far, this book is excellent. The previous book was excellent as well. And so I continue to be better at my profession because I continually know that there's more to learn. I'm continually engaged, making sure that I stay current, because the people that I command, I expect them to stay current. Well, I better do that too. I better make sure that I am at the top of my game as well. If I'm going to expect them, that's a two-way street. That trust is a two-way street, and that making sure that that I'm doing the best I can for them, and they're doing the best that I can. That two-way street, that we're doing the best we can for those that we're protecting.
Yeah, because I think generally speaking, the day that you stop evolving, especially in a craft like the fire service and a calling like the fire service, is the day you should probably walk away. What's the old saying? When you feel you've done everything, it's probably time to go, because you're going to get yourself hurt, or you're going to get somebody else hurt. I love that. Here you are. You've been on the job so long. Counting the volunteer experience is 40 years in total when you count Farmingdale, and of course currently with the FDNY, and you still want to learn. Because some of the best teachers are the ones, I feel at least, that love to be taught.
Yeah, and yeah, and if you decide that you know it all, it's time to go. And teaching, right? So I do a lot of teaching as well.
Mm-hmm.
That helps you stay current as well, right? It's which is that whole circle, right?
Right.
You're teaching it, you're passing it along, mentoring our next generation, which is a common theme on several of your of your guests. I keep trying to read the chat, and it keeps throwing my thought process off. So I'm going to stop reading the chat. So if you see something, you throw it out there. But I do see a couple of good people out there. Ron Zoni's in the chat.
Garrett Lindgren.
Irvin Elwood is in there. So I see some good people. But I can't keep reading it because every time I do, I lose my chain of thought and forget what you asked me.
Don't worry, I'll highlight them as we go. We got, of course, 1075 here, and Billy Kennedy. He's North Star Crisis Management, but his name's Billy Kennedy, retired NYPD Emergency Service Sergeant, and he's also a former guest of this show. Billy, it's good to see you. I haven't seen you in a little bit in the live chat, so good to have you here. So, I feel like if you, again, this is the beauty of the FDNY. You could spend your entire career in a truck company and have so much fun. You could spend your entire career in an engine company and have so much fun. Of course, you didn't, and you're still having fun. But those 6 years in 323, I imagine you wouldn't trade them for anything.
So people always say, if you could change something in your career, what would you change? And you know what? As far as my assignments and where I worked, I wouldn't change anything because my experiences along the way, no matter where they were, they've formed me into the person that I am today, and they've crafted my leadership style. It's crafted my desire to promote. It's all of the different things who I am. I mean, it's always remember where you came from, mm-hmm. And I never all of the places all had a significant part in my current version, right? Which hopefully is better than the version that came on the fire department in 1992 and better than the version that was a battalion chief. And, so that's the goal, right? Hopefully I'm more knowledgeable. I'm better. Maybe I'm more sympathetic to other, to other people's struggles and stuff like that. So, it's a constant evolution to be better, to be a better version of yourself. And hopefully you make those around you better as well.
I go back to something that Chief Jonas mentioned in the previous episode last week, whereas, as he was gradually studying in his pursuit to ascend in the ranks of the FDNY, whereas a book he was reading to study for lieutenant, he goes back and he's reading that as a captain, and now he's thinking like a captain. And when he reads a book as a chief that was previously designed for captains, now he's thinking as a chief. And I love that because, again, you're always working your mind, not just with what you're learning, but as you mentioned earlier, with what you're picking up around you, both what to do and what not to do. And I think that segues us perfectly into 1998. Here we are. Special Operations Command's about to turn 25 years old in a couple of weeks, by the way. July 1st, 2023 will mark 25 years, a quarter century of SOC. And, it's a new concept at the time. It wasn't popular at first because guys were thinking they were just going to do hazmat. Of course, more was added. You can go to 1075s, and that was appealing to a lot of guys. So Squad 270 and Squad 288 in Queens specifically opens up. They're converted from engines into squads. Tell me about at least, did you have to try out for SOC at that time?
Yeah, so the SOC had already been in existence. What was new was the addition of the squad companies. Some of them. They already had Squad 1 and Squad 41, and then they had the 5 rescues.
This was
and
13
then they added
David,
the additional, right? Yeah, they just added the additional squad companies. So the 25th anniversary that would be of those squad companies, not all of SOC. Rescue 1. I want to say Rescue 1 is, and I should know this for sure. Someone in the chat will know it. I'm positive. Is the oldest rescue in the country.
It is.
And they've been around for a very, very long time. I mean, they have a very storied history there. But so I had to go to a tryout for the to go to the squads, and I went there, and they have you do all these different things. You have to stretch a 2.5-inch line like by yourself, and then they overcharge it and put one other person on the hose line who's not helping you really. Then you have to go start a saw. You have to pull a ceiling, cut a roof. All these different things that you have to do. You have to, do a search, pull a mannequin out of a smoky environment. All these different things back to back to back. And some people were exhausted after doing it. Some people didn't do well on some of the tests. We had to force a door as well. And while I was going through it, I saw a couple of all the captains were there watching. It was like tryouts for a football team, And I spoke to a couple of them. The two that stand out that I spoke to was Jerry Tracy, who was going to be the captain of Squad 18, and Tom Richardson, who was going to be the captain of Squad 270. Both of those men I had experience with. They both covered through 323 at some period when they were new captains just bouncing around. And they both remembered me. They remembered that I was into the job. And I did well at the tryouts, but I didn't know, I didn't know how legitimate it was if they would take, somebody that only had 5 years from an engine. And I didn't know any of that. I came home a couple of days later. I got a phone call from Tom Richardson, and he said, brother, I'm taking you to Squad 270. And me, like a bonehead, my first question to him was, well, where is that? I didn't care where it was. I knew I was going to be a part of special operations. I actually thought that Jerry Tracy might call me for Squad 18, and I would have went to either of the companies. I would have went to any of the squad companies. The fact of the matter is, all of them go to fires. All of them are highly trained. All of them get the same training, and they are all exceptional firefighters. To this day, they're still all exceptional firefighters, whether they're anywhere in special operations. And I loved my time there. We went to so many fires. I mean, it was and emergencies. It was just, and learned from some of the best firefighters and officers there too. But the mix that Tom Richardson put together for that initial company was really just amazing.
Oh, the juice was definitely worth the squeeze. And for those of you that don't know, and most of the audience does, I mean, you guys, either if you're not fire buffs, you were firemen in New York City yourselves. But for those that may not be familiar with it, the squad companies, this is what was so unique, and this is what I think appealed to a lot of guys. You could still operate as a first due engine in whatever vicinity your company was housed, but you could also go to the citywide emergencies too, if the situation called for it. Let's say you have a situation like, for example, what occurred with the parking garage collapse the other day. You can go to an emergency like that, and if you had a fire in your neck of the woods where your engine company is, regardless, you could still go do that first due work. So for a fireman, especially for a younger fireman at the time, you had 6 years on the job by that point with the FDNY. That's nirvana. That's a can't lose situation.
Everywhere I went, I worked with amazing people. I remember I'm detailed up to Squad 41 in the Bronx for a night tour. And there's a report of a building collapse in Brooklyn on State Street. And the next thing you know, we're on our way. And this was before September 11th. And like, here I am. I'm assigned to a company in Queens, to a squad in Queens. I'm detailed up to the Bronx. And here I am. I'm on my way to Brooklyn. So prepare for the possible. And because some of the things that we see and go to, if you were to say, we're going to do a drill on this, right? You'd say, that's impossible. That'll never happen. But then boom, then you're responding to it, whether it's a gas tanker that overturns underneath I-95 overpass, or a building that flies off of the FDR and lands upside down. Preparing for these things is what enables you to operate efficiently, effectively, and safely when we're called.
Oh, of course. And you're referring to that. It was a gas explosion, right, in Brooklyn in 2000, the State Street collapse.
I believe it was. I believe it was a gas explosion. Yeah, but it leveled the brownstone building.
Yep, that was it.
We operated there for hours. Throughout the night. Captain Tizo was the captain. He was working. He was working that night. And in addition to, I don't remember all of the firefighters. I actually have a picture of it somewhere down here of it, because it was. We took a picture of all the people that were working, and some of them. One of the members that worked with us that night was killed on September 11th. And we were all friends, because when they formed the squads, when they formed the squads, the firefighters were detailed several months before the July 1st official night that we went into service. And what we would do is every day tour, all the squads were detailed to the fire academy for training. So all day long, we worked with all the other brothers and sisters from the other squads. So our battalion, we knew each other even before we were, because of all of that. It was just an amazing time, an amazing experience. When they opened up Squad 8 in Staten Island, I remember I visited those guys and girls there, and just I told them, I said, the experience that you're in the midst of right now will be one of your best career experiences that you will ever have. You've been involved with the formation of a new company. That is so infrequent. That is so infrequent on the FDNY that to be a part of it is just an amazing blessing. And when we get together and we see these the firefighters that we worked with, it's always a good time, regardless of what squad company that they worked in.
Of course, it's a beautiful thing, and it's a lot to be proud of, especially like we talked about earlier, a quarter century later. I'm smirking a bit, and we're talking with Chief Frank Leeb here on the Mike the New Haven podcast. It's volume 37 of the best, the bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite, because I see my friends from the gym in the chat, and they're watching tonight. So, guys, thank you for watching, and focus on your workout. Of course, listen to me while you do get that pump in, but I appreciate that. My buddies from Planet Fitness, who I will see later in the week, trying to make me laugh and trying to throw my focus off, but you're not going to succeed. Love you guys. Thanks again for watching. So you kind of talked about the building collapse in 2000, but besides that, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because again, the concept of squads was so new at the time, and it took a while for skeptics to come on board with it. Eventually they did, of course. That 1998 to 2000 period, besides, of course, like I said, the collapse, is there any other major emergency that comes to mind that, you went to when you were in 270? Pre 9/11?
Oh boy. Yeah. So many. So I'll tell you, before I get into some of the incidents, so you're 100% right. We had to earn our bones, right, somewhere going to incidents. And you know where we earned them? We earned them by paying attention to the little details. We drilled constantly, and we would go out to other areas of our response area and drill with them. The chiefs when we went to hazmat incidents, we knew what we were doing. So yes, we were going to fires, but we had an obligation. We were formed because we were going to go to hazmat runs. So we became really, really good at hazmat. So when you showed up and you're the only company in that tiered response that is operations level or technician level, you were the ones that were doing the work. So everybody saw that you were competent in what you were doing. And that led to trust quickly. So we had a pretty quick trust in our area. That doesn't mean everybody liked that we were there, because there was the fear that we were going to take work away from them, which we didn't take work away from them. We would operate when in the gaps where we were needed, especially when the other companies were finding victims. But in 270, the battalions and the companies we ran in with, those were well trained into the job firefighters. They were great at what they did. Yeah. And absolutely. So we'd come in and we made impacts at a lot of fires. I would tell our new firefighters when they got there, I'd say, here's what you need to know. You can make an impact at every incident you go to. It's up to you and what you do, whether that impact is going to be positive or negative. Mm-hmm. If we go to a pin job, right? And, one of the local companies that we'd get in pretty quick with, 126 and 127, if they're teaching their probie how to force a door, the patient's stable and everything's good, we shouldn't be muscling our way in there. Let them train their member. We all benefit from that member being better at his craft. And we'd have occasionally you'd get a member who maybe wouldn't be with the program and he would force his way in, but that wasn't how we wanted to operate. That's not professionalism. Right. Let them train their person. Now, if we had a car accident where there's two cars, or the car's upside down, or there's a lot of people trapped, there's plenty of work for all of us. And, that coexist and be part of that team was important. And I think eventually the relationship certainly got better. Certainly when 133 was then a new truck company in the area. So they had somebody new to hate for a little while.
Yeah.
But, I loved working in that area. I loved going to the different fires and emergencies there. And I loved the fact that we ran in with a lot of firefighters in areas that were very into the job, like I was, and they knew their job, they knew their positions, and we were there to pick up to operate in the gaps, when we could. But so a couple of incidents that I recall, we had an incident on the air train. That was when it was before it went into operation. We would commonly train down at JFK Airport with that. So for the viewers that don't know, the air train is a rail line that connects JFK to Jamaica Station and also Lefferts Boulevard for the train station. So it's a very good way to get to the Long Island, to get to the airport from the Long Island Railroad, all the subway systems in New York City. It was built over a couple-year period, and we would go to JFK to train with this one young individual. He had his career job. He was so into what he was doing and so into making sure that we operated safely. They were doing They were doing a test run where they put jersey barriers, cement barriers inside the train, and he was on that train. They were simulating a full train, and they put subflooring in the train so they didn't ruin the floor. And when the train went around one of the turns, he was pinned and crushed up against the front of the air train. And unfortunately, he perished during that incident. But we learned all we knew about the air train from him. And here we were before the first day that this air train went into operation. We were utilizing the skills to try and save the man that was training us on how to operate at these if we would have an incident there. We knew that you couldn't go through the front or rear of the train. He was pinned up against the front. So we used our tool called the grip hoist, and we moved the jersey barriers one at a time. We knew the anchor points from his training. We knew we couldn't go through the front of the train from his training us, and we gave him every opportunity to survive because of the training that he gave to us. And I'll never forget that call. I'll never forget him and how much he loved training the FDNY members. And could you imagine if we got there and we didn't know what to do?
Right.
And he was trapped for an extended period of time, and maybe he died because we didn't have the capability, right, or the capacity. You wouldn't be able to live with yourself. But we did, and we immediately recognized that. We used our grip hoist, and we pulled the heavy jersey barriers away from him, and then we were able to get him out. Like I said, unfortunately, he didn't survive. But that was a team effort from the FDNY. We were able to remove him from there, but we utilized the local ladder companies to remove him and their backboards and stretchers to get him out, because it was in a difficult area that wasn't reachable via the highway. The majority of it goes over a highway, but the area where this happened was not over the Van Wyck Expressway. It was in an area that is between the Van Wyck and the JFK property where it was. So, but it was, it should never be because you're not prepared. It should never be a lack of preparation in whatever that is. And, think about, if you could dream it, it could happen. If you could think about it, it could happen. And that's how you increase your capacity to operate at these is by drilling and preparing. And he gave us that. In that incident. I'll give you another quick fire from that time frame, because it was a learning lesson for me. We go to the Rockaways for a commercial fire in the basement. It turns out it's an oil burner that extends from the pit. You can't see 2 inches in front of you. We get there, and we're able to go inside the building. They have the door closed to the basement. The truck companies had gone in there. They're out of air, and now they want us to go in there and find the fire. So I tie off my search rope. I tie it on the first floor of that building to a permanent structure. I'm like, all right, everything's good. We go down. We find the fire. The engine. We tell the engine follow the search rope. They come in. They put the fire out. We then leave. Now I'm almost out of air, and I come out and I get to the end of my search rope, and it is lights out black. Wow. I'm in the building. Why? Because in my haste, I didn't think what is going to be the scenario for this fire in 10, 20, or 30 minutes from now. I tied my search rope off. In hindsight, they opened up the door to the basement, and my rope was 15 feet from there, and I was inside the structure. That was a stupid place to tie off the rope. So I get to it now. I got to decide. All right, stay calm. Which way's out? I'm listening, and I hear the rigs, and I move towards the rigs, towards the sound of the rigs, and I get myself out. And I don't talk about that for years. Now I talk about it all the time, because the importance of making sure that you think before you act, and make sure that you got your training, right? Your training tells you where to tie off the search rope in an area that's not contaminated and won't be contaminated. And so I passed that story along with the hopes that someone will be using the search rope. And remember to make sure that even though that environment was good inside that building, I should have went the extra 30 feet to the front door or the back door and tied off in an environmentally better place than where I wound up tying it off.
Proper tactics save lives, as is the case for emergency response as a whole. And you talked earlier about the training of first responders as a whole. And again, I remember something that someone told me on the show a while ago, which is you have to slow things down. And it's not easy to do when a building's burning or when somebody's firing a gun. But in that moment, that's where the training kicks in. It has to be muscle memory. It's not recommended. It's recommended it should be muscle memory. It needs to be muscle memory to slow things down. Because if you're not slow, and I'm preaching to the choir when I say this here, if you're not slow in your operations, there's already enough panic going in. There's already enough haste that's led to this moment. You're just throwing kerosene on a fire, essentially.
Yeah, and you know what? It doesn't matter. Derek Jeter, Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods,
Wayne Gretzky.
What do they have in common? They practice. They are constantly. Derek Jeter would take 2 hours of ground balls. Why? Because he wants to be better. Tiger Woods would be on the practice green putting 1 foot putts, right? At nauseum, because he wants to be brilliant. They want to be brilliant at the basics, because then that enables you to succeed and excel in all other aspects of what you're doing. And if these high level athletes can do it, I mean, we're high level athletes in a different profession.
Yeah,
and
that's a great way to put
it. It's and act that way and understand that way. That's why we're the difference is our actions or our lack of preparation equal the difference between someone living and somebody dying. Mm-hmm. The difference between making or missing that putt might mean a little bit of money for them. It might mean a lot of money, right? But for us, it's far more valuable than a couple of dollars. It's the difference in lives saved or lives lost.
Mm-hmm. That's a perfect way to put it. Just before I get to your rank ascension, going to lieutenant or being promoted to lieutenant in 2002, later captain in 2007, just to wrap the bow on the Squad 270 years, 9/11 happens. And I remember Ray talking about this. 270 did not go right away. They went later. They were kept back to cover the whole city and make sure that the rest of the city had some protection while members went down to the Trade Center. So they didn't lose anybody that day. But of course, SOC was decimated, the rescues, of course, and so many of the squads lost members. And just focusing on Queens alone, 288 and Hazmat 1 lost 19 guys that day. So in the aftermath of September, from that day forward to about, I guess when the last beam was removed in May of 2002, tell me about trying to cover Queens as 288 is also still trying to cover Queens, but also going down to the pile to look for their guys.
Yeah, so there was no such thing as a day off. For a while, we were on the AB chart. In SOC, I think until till at least Thanksgiving, we were on the AB chart, which meant you worked 24 hours on and then you were off 24 hours. But when you were off, we would have to fill in. We would have to fill in working the hammer teams for the white powder incidents that were going on. Mm. So we were working with our brothers and sisters in the NYPD. Meeting them, and then responding to all the powder runs. In fact, so after September 11th, we were also, they put most of the rescues out of service, and we would staff Rescue 2, I remember a couple of tours where I would work in rescue too, when we were the only rescue in service, and we'd only go to second alarms. And what we would do is we would just go to wakes and funerals when we didn't have calls. But I remember there was an incident when I was working in as part of the Hammer team, and I was with I was with a couple of the brothers from the NYPD, and we got a report of a building explosion in Manhattan. And so we responded to that, and it wound up not being a building explosion. It was a scaffolding collapse in the middle of a building where a bunch of workers were doing pointing on the building. And we were, I don't remember, it was the only tour that I worked with those brothers from the NYPD. I do not remember who I was working with. Interestingly enough, I still have my helmet that I wore that day with the NYPD, because I wound up leaving. I wound up getting stitches after that call, because I cut myself operating. But I had my firefighting gear with me, but I did not have my technical rescue gear with me. So, you know, the brothers, they said, here, use this. And then when I went to the hospital, they were a different job. They were from the ESU that's in Flushing.
Truck 9 or Truck 10.
We'd meet them at their quarters, and then we would go out and do what we had to do. But you know, I had good tours with those brothers. They talk about the rivalry. The rivalries on the hockey rink and on the football field, and occasionally at certain technical rescue incidents. But my brother's retired from the NYPD. It's you know, we certainly stand together with all the other first responders, police, fire, EMS. You know, all of us. We're all in this together.
You know the show, so you know you just made my night with that, because my worlds just collided right there. FDNY, you know how much I love ESU, and they both just collided in that one little moment. And our friends,
I know that. That's why I had to tell you. And I didn't, you know, I don't want anybody asking for the helmet back, you know, because I treasure it along. You know, I have many different helmets that I have in my basement, and there's only one helmet that's not an FDNY helmet, and that is my NYPD ESU helmet that I wore on that day as we were removing and helping to remove the people that were trapped. And I remember the firefighters looking at me. Here I am, like I think I had my bunker pants on, and there I am with an ESU helmet. You know, so it was pretty funny. You know, that I had an incident like that. I mean, unfortunately, a couple of people, I believe, perished in that collapse of the scaffolding. But again, the members that responded, they were trained. Certainly, I was trained, and certainly the people I was working with that day, they were certainly trained, and we gave everybody the best chance. And that was that was a couple of months after September 11th. I can't even remember when it was exactly, because I responded. So 9/11, then we had the plane crash in the Rockaways. I was working for that as well. And then I had that scaffolding. So it was constantly, it seemed like there was major incident after major incident, and I seemed to catch several of them.
Hey, listen, you know, it's better to be, depending on what the emergency is, better to be a black cloud than a white cloud, because the white cloud, I mean, you're bored to tears, but the black cloud, he's always running, or she's always running. So, I mean, we're the reverse in that sense, because where I'm working right now at the firehouse, I'm pretty much the white cloud. When I go there, there's nothing but medical calls. There's no fires. But when I leave, hey, you missed the fire last night. You know, so
I always say, you know, be careful what you ask for, because you know, I like to be working when someone needs help. I like to be working, but you know, it's just as good if there's no fires or there's no crazy incidents. That's okay. You know, keep everybody safe. That's good. That's a good thing too. But if there's going to be a fire, well, you know, yeah, I want to be working. I was talking about this with someone the other day. One of my good friends is getting close to retirement, and we were talking that I have realized that I could live to be 120 years old, and I will never go to enough fires to satisfy my appetite for going to fires. It doesn't matter. That just simply will never happen. And I know, especially talking to to retired firefighters that are older, I realize that that's the case for them too. So it's probably the biggest hurdle that you have to get over when you're thinking about retirement or hanging up your helmet, is realizing that, you know, yeah, I wish I could stay 40 years old or 30 years old. And I like to say 40 because I had more experience. I'd like to say I knew a little bit more, and just stay at that age and keep going to fires, right? But the better you keep yourself in health and shape, right? You mentioned some of your viewers are at the gym. Well, that's good, right? That's what we need to do. It enables you to work for bonus years or go to bonus fires later in life. So that's certainly very, very important.
Or even have the mental acuity too and clarity to respond to these fires, because something like that definitely provides a consistent physical fitness leads to consistent mental fitness as well. So moving along to you making lieutenant, and of course there's a period of 2002 to 2011 where you're first a lieutenant, then later on a captain, then you're working in Engine 76, which I'll get to in a second. Making lieutenant, this is a 19-year education by this point, from Farmingdale to the FDNY. By that point, it's 10 years in the FDNY, the last 4 in Special Operations Command. And you're still working in Queens. Now you're in Corona, of course, with 324. And you're learning how to be a fire officer, which is a role you've been in for quite a long time now. But just those early years, 02, 03, 04, learning how to lead men and think not just of your own safety, but theirs too. Tell me about that process for you mentally evolving from firefighter to fire officer.
Well, and Chief Jonas spoke about it the other day, about saying that the 2 hardest jumps in your career are from firefighter to lieutenant, and then from captain to chief, because your mindset changes, right? Your responsibility grows. And that is something that you definitely need to, to be aware of. And that's hard, because what you need as an officer is more of the soft skills, right? How to talk to people, how to address them. They're also the same type of skills you need, by the way, to in relationships and when you're talking to your children. And that's something that we probably don't get enough training of, even though in the FDNY we come offline and we go for every rank, you come offline and for a certain period of time, and then you go to different classes. But we focus a lot on tactics and strategy in those, and sometimes it's those soft skills. So there's an adjustment period for that, for sure. That's why they typically want to move you to a different area of the city, because you're gonna make mistakes, and you're gonna realize, wow, that was the absolute worst way to handle that. I'm gonna handle that differently next time.
Right.
But it's the value of mentorship, of people that that are able to help you and bounce those things off of. So the one of the terms they use for the Navy SEALs is you need a swim buddy, right? Someone who's going to be there to tell you what you need to do. You need that in the fire service, and I would assume that you need that in law enforcement as well. Someone who you can use to bounce those things off of, that will tell you, that will tell the emperor when he's not wearing clothes, that will tell you that you're off base on that. And it's good to do those things before you jump and make that decision, because then it's hard to unwind some of that when you handle a situation poorly. But if you do, I've learned that the best way is to say, you know what, be up front and tell the member, you know what, I didn't really handle this well, and make it right. And that's okay. No one's perfect, and that's all right. But admit when you are wrong and correct it, rather than living with that decision and going, that doesn't. You live with that decision, and it's the wrong decision. It'll fester. It'll be bad in the firehouse. So that's not the good way. If you make a bad decision, own up to it, move along, and make a better decision the next time.
It happens. It happens to the best of us, as you said. Nobody's perfect, and I think it's good also that for a new fire officer, if he's going to a house, 9 times out of 10, he's going to have a guy there with a long time in that company. It's a senior man that he can rely on and essentially use, as you said, as that swim buddy that he can bounce things off of. So that, hey, what do you think about this? You've worked here a long time. Even if he doesn't have the same rank you do, the experience is such that you give him that respect, and boom, he's able to lead you in the right direction. As long as he sees that your intentions are good and that you genuinely want to be a good fire officer and lead the men correctly. And that was certainly the case in 324 and later on in 76. But before I get to 76, 2005, go down to New Orleans for Hurricane Katrina, which was an absolutely devastating experience, one of the worst storms this country has ever seen. You guys have been through something similar in New York, not with the storm, but, you know, in terms of a major tragedy just 4 years prior. And here you are now, the same way New Orleans and the rest of the country helped New York in 2001, the favors being returned 4 years later. Tell me about first getting the call that you may have to go down there and then actually going down there and seeing that devastation up close.
Sure. So before I get to that, though, I want to put a bow on the last statement you said.
Please.
And it's about the different swim buddies and the people, the senior firefighters in the firehouses. In my career, up to and including today, I rely on firefighters and my conversations with firefighters far more than I do with other chiefs and officers. The firefighters know what's going on in the firehouse. They know what's going on in the firehouse. Now, if I'm in command of an incident, obviously I'm talking with chiefs and stuff, but I regularly speak with the firefighters. They're the ones that they know everything that's going on, regardless. So when you're in a firehouse, you have to rely on them. They may not be the promoted leader, but they're the ones that know where it's at. They know what's going on. So you have to make sure that you maintain relationships with them. Again, remember where you came from, because if you remember where you came from, they'll also remember where you came from, and that's important. That is a two-way street as well, right? When you're saying they should have did this, the leader should have did that. I think that's important. And I'll tell you, at my rank, when we have staff meetings and different meetings, one of the first things that we always discuss is what can we do for the brothers and sisters that are getting on fire trucks and ambulances? How can we make their job better? That is always what we're thinking about. All right. So Hurricane Katrina, 2005. I come into work. I'm in 324 engine in quarters with the division, which is important because when I come in, they know I'm into the job, and they ask me, "Hey, we're sending a team of 300 firefighters to New Orleans. Do you want to go?" I said, "Absolutely. I've been watching it on the news. I'm wishing I could help. I know I have technical expertise from my times in SOC, and I know SOC is probably going. And I want in." I said, "Well, when?" And they said, "Midnight tonight. You got to be at JFK Airport midnight tonight." I said, "Midnight tonight? That's in 5 hours." They said, "Yeah." I said, "All right, count me in." I said, "What? I got to work. What about, I was in early. So I said, what about, you're going to get an officer?" They said, "Don't worry about that. Go home now, get packed up and be at JFK Airport by 11 o'clock. I said, "All right." I do that. I go home, I pack up, tell my wife I'm going to head to New Orleans for a couple of weeks. And it's just an amazing experience. The firefighters that I met there, I'm still friends with some of the FDNY members. I didn't meet them until we were in New Orleans when they were assigned to me. The firefighters in New Orleans, the job that they did down there is simply, it's nothing short of heroic. We got to work with them for a while. They were our drivers. I was the officer when I was on duty, and we just went for most of the time, we went from fire to fire. It was just crazy in some of the flooded areas there. I remember one of the, I'll give you two quick stories of experiences that when we were there. One of the New Orleans chauffeurs drafted from a milk trailer. You see the big silver trucks that deliver milk. Mm-hmm. They now had water in this. I don't know where they got but he was drafting. He used his drafting skills to draft from the milk truck, and they were also drafting from the water on the street. So their ability, their skills and their talents were really incredible. And so I could never say enough about the New Orleans firefighters. And the second experience, we are in the Garden District, and we are protecting this row of homes, and the fire is roaring. I remember we go in this one structure, and it's got all these antique clocks and watches in it, and we're pulling the curtains down, trying to make it where fire can't extend to it. We're doing all we can. We wound up losing that building. We're on the roof of the building, and a helicopter comes and drops the Bambi bucket full of water onto us. We wound up saving another building next to it, but it really wasn't because of us. It was because it was far enough away that it didn't burn. And the one news station that was reporting was out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and back at base camp, we were able to watch that. And they were reporting on the firefighters and what a good job they did saving this other historic building. And it was just sheer luck. It was just luck that the fire stopped, but they lost that building that had all of those antique watches and clocks in it. I mean, it was just, it was sad, but it was just an unforgettable 2 weeks in New Orleans. I'll never forget the experience and the people that I met there for sure.
Of course, it reminds me of something that Paul Hashigan talked to me about regarding his experiences in the Dominican Republic in 1998 after Hurricane George. And he said it best: great times under bad circumstances. Of course, you wish it didn't happen. Excuse me. Of course, I should say you wish this didn't happen, but you're at least glad that you met the people that you did and that you were able to forge those bonds that almost 20 years later are still as strong as ever.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, I see a question.
I'm going to get to it now. And Mike Thomas, I see your question as well, and I'll get to it a bit later. But this one's from Stu Kelsall and says, question for Chief Leeb. In your distinguished career, what skill did you initially find it to be difficult to become competent at?
Anything with tying knots, anything with ropes. I just had such a hard time. So I was able to be very good at the life-saving rope evolution, particularly when I was in Squad 270, because we trained on that. If you didn't know how to do the life-saving rope evolution blindfolded, you weren't going to be a member for Squad 270 very long. So we practiced that, so we were good that we could do it in the dark. But what I did was, after I took all the technical rescue classes, all the rope rescue, intermediate rope, all of those different things, I then became an instructor at the Fire Academy for those classes. So the way they did it at the Fire Academy was, as an instructor, you wouldn't be the lead instructor. So I became very good at what I did because I was teaching it. Again, we had all these amazing instructors that were great with the ropes, and eventually I became really good with the rope as well. And it was just to me that's the classic example of, I felt like I had two left hands and I couldn't do anything right with the rope. But that was how I got good at it, was by eventually becoming a teacher and working with it until it was my best friend.
Blindfolded. That's the crazy part. Let's not gloss over that. Blindfolded.
Yeah, and eventually, with some of the sock ropes, we would do these high slides off of the Con Edison smokestacks, and they were like 300 feet up in the air. And we'd go down, we'd invert on our way sliding down. You became so good and so confident with your equipment that's what we would do. And that's something I would not have dreamed of, because that was always my Achilles heel, was being proficient at tying the knots and the ropes. And eventually in East Farmingdale, we had several high angle incidents in New York City where we had to tie things with the camera right there in front of you. But I was lowered into a hole in East Farmingdale to remove people from one, because we had a team. I was lowered to remove a victim from a hole, and it was because of our training and our teamwork that we did that. And that was in February of 2001. So I had already been in SOC for a few years. I had already been teaching it, and I was proficient. So we were able to set up the high point, we were able to set up the ropes, and we were able to go down and remove the victim in a pretty short period of time.
Not to make you feel old, but February of 2001, I literally just turned 1 year old that month.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah. No, I knew. By the way, I love your tie and the suit that you're wearing tonight. The green, I love it. Very nice. Nicely done tonight, my friend.
Thank you. I had to come sharp for, the chief, I couldn't come slacking. So you knew I had to dress up for tonight's episode. Your analogy about, doing it blindfolded to the point where it becomes second nature reminds me of an episode of SpongeBob. And am I going to make a SpongeBob reference tonight? Yes, I am. Where, of course, if you know the show, the joke is he can't drive if his life depended on it. But one episode, he actually drove quite well when he was blindfolded. So there you go. Learning how to do it when the circumstances aren't in your favor can pay dividends down the line. So you make captain in 2007, and you spend 2007 to 2011 of course, in the Bronx in Engine 76. Now, to that point, you'd been, okay, you were in Brooklyn originally to start, of course, in Mill Basin with 323. But for the majority of your career, you've been in Queens, Squad 270, and of course, later on, Engine 324. Now, this is your first time working regularly in the Bronx.
In Manhattan. 76 is in Manhattan.
76 is in Manhattan. Excuse me. I'm on the Upper West Side. My apologies. Thanks for the correction. I got it mixed up with a separate engine company. So thanks for the correction. So now you're working in Manhattan on a regular basis, not counting times that you would go in for a SOC emergency where it would be a citywide thing or anything like that. So working on the Upper West Side, we talk about transitions in rank. There's also transitions in boroughs. Was the adjustment from being a fire officer and firefighter in Queens to now being one in Manhattan difficult at all, or did it not matter?
No, so there was an enormous learning curve, but again, you rely on your firefighters, right? And they will, they will lead you. They will lead you to the promised land, right? They will make up for that gap that you have, right? And they will accelerate the learning process to shrink that gap, right? That's what it's all about, and they know that. So I get there, and be like, hey, I'm new in Manhattan. I'm working one of my first tours. I'm in 25 truck in quarters with the 3rd Division. They are a great truck company. And this is probably my funniest run that I've ever gone on. So I'm answering one of you.
One of the rapid fires. Go ahead, that's fine.
So we go for an odor of smoke in the subway. And I get off the rig. We're second due. And I'm all ready to go. I'm ready to go to battle. And I could hear the firefighters scurrying in the back. We go down and of course, like I said, they're a great company. So they come down with me, and now we're coming back up, and it was nothing, which a lot of times the smoke in a subway is nothing in Manhattan. They go to these all day long, but I'm not used to that. I'm used to not having them as frequently and always going down. So we're on our way out, and the chauffeur of the first truck says to my chauffeur, "What are you guys doing off the rig?" And his reply to him was, "We have an overzealous captain working today." So I get on the rig and I said, overzealous, really? I'm overzealous? I said, how about you tell me? We're a team here. How about you tell me, hey, Cap, we don't normally get off at second due on these. Now, you could have told me that you saw I was gearing up. You could have told me that when I was getting off, whatever. But no, I'm an overzealous captain. So I love that story. Again, they're a great company. I worked there several times as a deputy chief. Later on in my career, I covered a lot there as well, and they just they're into the job. But that chauffeur that night didn't tell me,
Yeah.
But
Yeah, you live and you learn, just like I just did, right? If you can dock me 5 points for saying that 76 was in the Bronx instead of Manhattan. You see, folks, don't let the soup fool you. Even though I look professional, sometimes I am a goofball, as you just saw on display there. We have a question in the chat. It's another good one. And thanks for submitting your questions tonight. Like I said to you earlier, Mike Thomas, I do see yours. I promise I'm going to get to it a little bit later. And this question is from, like I said, Chris Visfardis. Was there ever an instance, I should say, where Chief Leeb was in a situation and thought, this is it?
That's a good question. And yes, and this is a fire that I very rarely speak about. And I was in Squad 270, and there's a taxpayer fire. And on arrival, all of the companies are working. They're working hard. And the fire is extending, and there's a lady outside who's screaming at the chief, at the battalion chief, who's saying, my kid is inside. My kid is inside. I left him inside. So we know, and the fire's in the basement. And we're ready to go, and we go in. We make entrance into the basement, and there's pretty heavy fire down there still when we're down there. And we're searching. The line is down there. We're on its way down there, and we're searching and looking for this kid. And all of a sudden, it sounds like the building is collapsing. And what it is, it's the stair collapsing, and it's a firefighter on the stair who collapses down into the basement. And he gets down, and now he literally lands 2 feet from me. And once I realized it, right through the fog of war, I'm like, what the heck just happened? And I said, bro, are you okay? And so I find out what company he's from, if he's injured, all the information I need to do. I transmit a mayday out to the incident commander, and other firefighters remove him. We continue to search for this kid, and we don't find him. The fire wind up going to like a third alarm. and he was actually an older kid, who was like a teenager, and he was found on in a hiding spot, like behind the compressor for the in the deli, behind the refrigerator areas. So it was in an area we wouldn't even, we wouldn't even consider someone to be in. It was an unoccupiable space, but he must have got afraid and went there. But the firefighter falling through the stairs, and the fire spreading. When we came out, my helmet had turned white from the heat, which the newer helmets will do when they have enough heat to them. And so it was only for a short period of time that I thought this is it. But once I realized what had happened, that it was the stairs that was collapsing, then it's just all about, we got a brother that's down, we got to do to get him out. And then the local companies did a remarkable job removing that firefighter. In fact, one of the firefighters wound up getting a medal for after they removed that firefighter, but he fell 2 feet from where I was.
Wow. I mean, that's absolutely incredible. And that teenager, did he make it?
He did not make it. No.
Well, unfortunately.
Now, he was found on probably the 6th time someone had searched the building. It was like a third alarm truck company that wound up finding him. But we knew, right? You have the mother is there saying that her kid is in, and I'm thinking it's a baby, right? It's a young, really young person, and it wound up being an older person who, they said he may have, he was a bit autistic, so they think he may have started a fire. And where was that fire potentially started? Near the stairs. So the stairs had been burning. We went through the exterior entrance to the cellar through the Bilko door. That was the way we went in to search. So we didn't go on that interior stair. Maybe I would have collapsed it had I gone on that stair, but we didn't. We were just searching in there. So just good question.
Very good question. And Stu, I see your other question. What I'm going to do for you, Stu, and for you, Mike Thomas, the original questions I had for the rapid fire, the first 2 questions, I'll insert your questions in their place. So we'll get to those at the end. I'm not going to forget. I see them, and rest assured I will get to them. And I mean, before I continue, it reminds me of a job that I watched the Bravest documentary at least, or it's still riding, but it was produced by the Bravest at least 2 to 3 times a year. And Still Riding is one of the best documentaries on the FDNY ever done. And there's a job, it's July of 2001. It's right before. And Kevin O'Rourke from Rescue 2, by all accounts, one of the nicest firemen perhaps who've ever served in the New York City Fire Department, is at a similar job where the floor collapses and he's spread eagle on a beam. But then again, same thing as you just described. The brother stepped in, did a great job, didn't miss a beat, picked him right back up off that beam, kept going, put that fire out. So it's a great testament to the camaraderie and the quick thinking that we talked about training earlier, right? Of the fire service, especially in the FDNY. So of course, working in 76 was great. 2011, you make chief, and now you're assigned to Battalion 46, which our mutual friend in the back room, who we'll see a little bit later, thinks is probably your favorite spot of your career. But before we talk about Battalion 46 in depth, and I don't know how much of a hand you had in this, and if you didn't, we can just gloss right past it. But Queens was hit particularly hard by Irene and Sandy back to back, especially Sandy. Now, before I ask the question I want to, did you have any heavy involvement in the Sandy response or no?
Yeah, I wound up. I was part of the incident management team by that point, and I spent a couple of weeks working as part of the incident management team in the aftermath. But I was working. I came into work. I came in early that day. I worked the night tour in Battalion 49. Mm-hmm. So I came in about noon, relieved somebody before the storm got there, and we ran all night long and the entire next day. We were constantly out of quarters for different fires, and it was just another wild experience on my job. And a funny story, although it wasn't funny at the time. I had played hockey the night before the hurricane, or 2 nights before the hurricane hit, right? And I would later learn that I broke my rib playing hockey during that night before. And there was no way I was going sick with this major hurricane bearing down on us. So I sucked it up and I went to work. I'd gone to the hospital and they said, yeah, you might have had a cracked rib, whatever. So then I do that 24. We're up. I had to put my bunker gear on several times, which was very painful. Then we had a freak snowstorm for Halloween as well. And so I'm like, I can't go sick now. Next thing you know, it's now the first week in November. I got pneumonia. I can barely breathe. I go sick. I go to the medical office and the doctor's like, there's no way you worked with a broken rib. He sends me down the hall to get an x-ray. I get an x-ray. I come back in and he says, you were wrong. You have 3 broken ribs.
Who hit you, Scott Stevens?
Yeah. So, but, there was no way. There was no way. I would regret that to this day if I had missed working that tour and being with my brothers and sisters. That 24. That was just incredible. Another incredible experience that we had. We're driving down the road and a transformer explodes, and then another time a telephone pole comes down in front of us. We're operating at a job, and I asked for additional units, and they said there's no units available. They wanted to send me to Manhattan for there was a crane incident. So they said 4-9 respond to Manhattan for the crane incident. I said, well, how would you like me to get there? Because at that point they'd already closed off the bridges and tunnels. So I said, ready. And then they said, disregard 4-9, stay in service. And then a lot of the battalions for the rest of Queens wound up going into the Rockaways because the Rockaways wound up having 120 houses burned down during the height of the storm that night. And I didn't go to that. I was just covering the majority of the rest of the borough. But just being there, the band of brothers, being with my brothers and sisters on the runs, I would have absolutely regretted not doing that. And if you've ever had broken ribs, that sucks.
Yeah.
that is an understatement. That absolutely sucks. But there's nothing that they can do for it other than give you this little device that you have to blow into to make sure that you don't collapse your lungs or do something to your lungs. But other than that, and don't laugh. You don't want to be laughing when you have that. But the juice was worth the squeeze, as you mentioned earlier. Being there with everybody, an unforgettable experience.
And that kind of ties into what I wanted to ask you. In FDNY Riggs, I see your question too. I promise I'll get to it. Hi, Don Gonzalez, the better half of Joe Maliga. I promised I would shout her out, and I'm shouting her out right now. Thank you for watching. Okay, so you went to Katrina in 2005. Here you had Sandy in 2012. And, of course, later on you went to Harvey in 2017 down in Houston. How do you think your experiences in 2005 helped you navigate 2012 in your backyard? And how do you think your experiences in your backyard in 2012 helped you navigate 2017 down in Houston?
Yeah, so they were vastly different because it involved us. But I think the empathy and seeing what the firefighters were doing in New Orleans, we saw from our firefighters who went to work and continued to show up for work. In some of these cases, their houses were destroyed, right? So knowing that, which is why we couldn't go sick, because there's people that don't have their house. We need to get them off as soon as possible so they can tend to their family, right? Because their family is part of our family. And if we, as responders, we have to make sure that we're taking care of both our responder and the family of and the loved ones of the responder. Because how do you expect someone to go to work not knowing if their family's safe? You can't, right? So I think you have to plan for that and prepare for that. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway, was that we have to make sure that we are doing all we can to support our people and give them the time they need to take care of their family.
I guess I could take the time now to get to FDNY Riggs' question, and it's a good one. And he asked, the rigs you've operated off of, like the squad and even up to the current day, did you and the members of the house customize or provide input to the shops for future proof for equipment carried on the rigs?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we would customize them, but the shops didn't like when we customized the rigs ourselves. But every time the FDNY is going to purchase new rigs, they solicit input from the field. They have a committee that has a say in what we do. Our fleet winds up purchasing the rigs, but our fleet services, but they're very knowledgeable of our rigs, but they also have the input. When the squad rigs were, so we initially took engines and converted them into the squad rigs, and they put different cabinets on them and compartments. But then they immediately went into the process of purchasing squad rigs, and members from each of the company had input on the committee for what we had. So we got the rigs that we were looking to get. So yeah, that's a good question. We definitely have the firefighters have a say in the process, no doubt.
As they should. As
Yeah.
they should, for sure. And FDNY Riggs has a great channel. I highly recommend for those of you who are not subscribed to him, please go check it out. He does a great job of highlighting the FDNY fleet, both their history and, of course, Riggs responding throughout the 5 boroughs. So and I don't want to keep you too long, so I'll ask you a few more questions before we get to the rapid fire. You've been a chief now a dozen years, promoted in 2011. You evolved in that rank. You made the difficult transition, like we talked about earlier, from captain to chief to your current role. And communication's key. You've had a lot of big emergencies, of course, prolonged crises like COVID, or something that was in a day, but was still definitely a major event like the Twin Parks fire in the Bronx. And there are certain instances where you might be the second in command, or you might be the guy in charge of the whole thing. You have your fellow chiefs, you have your captains, you have your lieutenants, and you have your firefighters, all boots on the ground, all in different functions of the emergency, but all trying to achieve the same goal, which is saving property and life. Juggling that, every chief is different in how they manage it. How does Frank Leeb manage it when a situation is that chaotic?
Well, so I think the biggest thing you have to realize is that your ability to manage an incident is limited, right? To once an incident gets big enough, you need additional help. If I have a second alarm assignment and I have 150 or 200 radios and people communicating, I've exceeded my capabilities for span of control and to be able to do that. So we sector it out. We have different people. You'll communicate with other people, but I think sectoring it to where that, and also I think you have to realize that that's a limitation that we all have. No matter how good you are, if you have 50 people transmitting important information to you, you're going to miss information and you're not going to process it properly. So, which is why we have on that tiered response, first battalion chief comes, and then a second battalion chief comes. He's the 1075 chief. The deputy comes, and then one battalion chief and one deputy is out there. And then on a second alarm, additional people come, including a member that's going to manage our resources. On a third alarm, a staff chief comes. So there's a tiered response so that we know that, because we know that the sum of all of us is far greater than any individual. Mm-hmm. And managing incident is no different. It's a team sport. Yeah. That may sound cliche, but it's incredibly true. And I've been at fires as the chief of safety where my opinion is solicited by the incident commander. Why? Because my lens is coming from the safety aspect, and they want and need that. So it's not about their ego. It's not about them running the fire. It's about making sure that we are employing the best tactics and strategies to achieve the optimal outcome for the civilians and for our responders, right? So we want to make sure that we're best protecting our responders as well, and that is also considering considering our people and the safety of our people. And who helps me a lot with that when I'm on the scene as well, and we've talked about this with firefighters, is my man Driver Joe. So. Yep.
Driver Joe.
There you go, Tankopotamus. I got in Driver Joe. I don't even know if Joe. I don't even know if Joe was in. Yeah.
I don't know if he's in the chat.
If Driver Joe is in here tonight.
I don't think he is. I think he'll watch it, and if someone.
Oh, he'll definitely watch it. Yeah.
Yeah, he'll watch it.
But if he doesn't, yeah.
There you go.
Well,
there you go.
On our way into work, we'll make sure that we watch it. In fact, we'll watch it tomorrow morning.
Oh, there you go.
We'll watch it tomorrow morning. I'll make sure. Even if he's seen it tonight, I'll make sure he'll watch it twice.
So nice when you watch it twice, of course. And I love that because there was just a 5 alarm job in the Bronx, I believe, where the fire was roaring. And our mutual friend, John Esposito, went up there. He answered a couple of questions from the press, immediately turned it over and gave credit to the chief that was with him. He wasn't a glory hog about it. He wasn't one that was going to stick out his chest and say, "Hey, look what I did." No, he was very quick to say and had no problem saying, "Yeah, here's the chief that ran most of the operation. Here you go, talk about it." And he came in and did that.
Well, Chief Esposito is one of the most humble, well-spoken people that you'll ever meet, right? And he could talk. He could talk tactics all night long with you. He could talk strategy all night long with you. But if I'm at a fire with him, he's always looking for input. And you heard the interview that he did at the 5th Alarm. I mean, it was exceptional. It was a lesson in how to give an interview about a fire scene.
Calm as can be. Calm as can be. You would think the guy just woke up from a nap, and I say that as a compliment. It's like, it was burning, no injuries, a couple of minor injuries, firefighter to the hospital. Meanwhile, you look at pictures of the job, and it's like, how are you that calm? But again, it's the experience factor, and that's a guy I also got to get on the show down the road. Hopefully, I could have him on at some point because I would love to chronicle his journey in the FDNY to this point where he's at currently. And the last question I'll ask you before I get into the rapid fire is: now as chief of safety. Being the chief of safety in 2023 is a lot different than being the chief of safety in, let's say, 1995. Technology has changed. There's so much now at the disposal of the fire service to make things safer. And it's a lot to keep track of. So as far as the modern tools that are available, what's your process, if any, of deciphering what tools would be beneficial for the FDNY as far as safety is concerned in the modern era and what tools might not be?
So that's a good question. We have a robust research and development unit, which is why so many people around the country look to see what the FDNY is using, because we'll evaluate it. We'll determine if it's something that we want to even consider. If it gets to the pilot phase, it'll do at least a 3-season pilot, at least a 9-month pilot. So that way it has all the different seasons. And if the FDNY uses it, it has passed a very rigorous process to get to that point. So they're the ones that determine what is good. We don't jump for the latest shiny thing just because it's the latest and maybe the hot item people are talking about. So, and that could be, any tool, whether it's the thermal imaging cameras, whether it's the SCBAs. It doesn't necessarily have to be a new technology such as the drones and stuff like that. But, safety chief and the safety command wears many different hats. And my job and my goal is to build upon what the previous chief of safety did, Mike Myers, and before him, Joe Jordan, and make it better, right? So the same thing we did in training, build upon the foundational cornerstones that were already there when you got there. I think one of the big concerns now is making sure that we're taking care of our members when it comes to cancer in the fire service. And I think behavioral health, mental health, and suicide is a problem that we're about to take head on in the FDNY.
Good.
And because it's important, we have to talk about these things. We have to bring some of these issues out of the shadows and talk about them, so we don't lose our brothers and sisters off of the fire ground. We don't want to lose them on the fire ground, and we certainly don't want to lose them off of the fire ground from results of whatever it is that they've seen, occupational stressors, or the calls. You can't unsee what you've seen, but it's also okay to not be okay. And we need to make sure that we are continually pushing that message out.
It's seeping into the fire service. It's seeping into the first responder community as a whole. And you never want to leave your friends behind asking why or what could I have done, which is why it's good that departments are opening up the discussions on that and not making it so taboo anymore.
I would never leave a brother or sister on the fire floor. I should never leave them alone when they're struggling with any other issues as well.
Mm-hmm. Amen. I agree completely. And just a heads up to Amanda Farinacci, who I love and who's been on the show previously. I'm going to annoy you a lot this summer because I'm going to ask to interview Mike Myers and Chief Esposito too. Separately, of course, but rest assured, Amanda, those requests are coming in. And Amanda's a good one. She was previously on the show for Volume 13.
Amanda's fantastic. She does a great job with the FDNY. We're very blessed to have her.
Yeah, she was previously featured for Volume 13 of The Best of the Bravest a year ago, and that was a fun chat with her. So it's now time for the rapid fire. 5 hit and run questions from me and 5 answers from you. Are you ready?
I'm as ready as I'm going to be, my brother.
All right. So, like I said, I'm going to replace what I was originally going to ask with Stu Kelsall and Mike Thomas's questions, and I'll get Mike's first. He says, "Hey, Chief, one last question. Are you getting close to hanging up the helmet soon?"
Every day you're a day closer to retirement. So, you know, no matter what I do, no matter what I do, no matter where I go, I'll never retire from the fire service. That would be impossible. It's in my DNA. It's in every fiber of my being. I love being around firefighters. I love firefighters. I love I love talking tactics and strategy. At some point, I'll realize that, going to fires firefighting is a young person's job, but at some point, but it will be, the word retirement is difficult, but every day, all of us are one day closer to retirement, every single day. How's that for avoiding the answer?
I was going to say Bob Rainey, who was just on Salty, he's like 77, 78. He's still going to fires. He's a volunteer where he lives now upstate. So listen, if you love what you do, why stop? Why stop? Even if you have to retire in a sense from a city job, that's the beauty of the New York area. You can go and still be a volley and do it until you feel like not doing anymore. So, one in some form or fashion, you'll always be committed. And I'm sure you'll be one of those guys like John Norman is, for example, or John Salk is. You'll be on the teaching circuit too. You already are. So there you go. There's another way to keep involved as well. And Stu Kelsall's question now for the second question of rapid fire, which is if there was anything that you could change about the job, and you're kind of in a unique position where you kind of can as chief of safety, what would it be and why?
So that has changed over the years, right? And what I would change, and what I wouldn't. I've been blessed to be in a position where a lot of the things that I wanted changed, and oftentimes it was procedural, that we needed a procedure on this or we needed something on that, where I've been able to implement those changes. So I'm blessed in that regard that I've been able to do that. Boy, what would I would have to say we have to do better in protecting our people. And of course, I'm the safety chief. So what would you expect? And also making it where an aggressive firefighter is a safe firefighter. And that goes for everything, right? Making sure you have a charged flashlight, making sure that your thermal imaging camera is working, making sure that you have a full SCBA cylinder at the start of a tour. Showering after a fire because we know that the contamination that's on us is killing us. Just buckling your waist straps on the SCBA, because if you don't have your SCBA straps buckled and now you get trapped, what happens? I'll tell you what happens. The entire fire operation comes to a screeching halt because now we're not aggressively fighting fire, right? Now we're aggressively trying to rescue one of our own, and rightfully so. But safety and aggressive firefighting go hand in hand. If you're an aggressive, safe firefighter, we'll take you anywhere. We'll put out any fire if we're doing it that way. And guess what? Your family, your loved ones at home want you to come home at the end of your tour in one piece. And that's a loaded question. In one piece, that's not getting cancer. That's not having mental health issues. It's all these different things. It's wearing your PPE correctly. It's all of these things. It is the ecosystem of safety that does not detract from being an aggressive and, dare I say, interior firefighter, right? Because there's times we should be putting water in from the outside, just like when it's from a tower ladder or when the fire meets us at the door. You got me ranting now, right? I didn't want to rant, but now you got me ranting.
That's what the show's for. Like I said, I don't cut people off. You could have went as long as you wanted to. I don't care. I don't care at all. So now for the third of the 5 questions, you came on the job with the FDNY in 1992. So you started out as a 90s fireman. Oh, Chief Leeb disappeared on me. So when he gets back, there he is. Favorite era of your career in the FDNY, the 90s when you first started, the 2000s when you ascended in the ranks, 2010s, or now 2020s? Or does it not matter?
Boy, and I got to plug. I just realized that I just got the notification my battery's going to die. So I gotta make sure I'm plugged in. Not.
We're getting a look at the Chief Leeb lair, and I guess on that note, Tank, get ready because I can bring you in now while the Chief plugs in his computer. He's been in the back room tonight.
I'm back. I had to plug in my computer. It was telling me it wasn't plugged in. So you got this, and then my computer moved.
Tank.
I had to plug it in. Anyway, Tank, there he is.
I just said I was going to bring you in while the Chief was plugging in his computer, but Tank's here, of course. He's been in the back.
What's up, fam? Let me get some headphones on so I don't echo. Hang on.
All right, no problem. We'll see Tank again in a second. So like I was saying, favorite era of your career: 90s, 2000s, 2010s, or now?
I would. I want to go back and be a firefighter with the knowledge I have today. Because I don't care what anybody tells you. There is nothing like having the nozzle at a fire. There's nothing like that. Now, it's nice. The can is a good position too. Irons is good. That's all good. But there's nothing like being a nozzle firefighter. So having the at this point in my career where I know a little bit more than I did as a firefighter, especially a new firefighter, that would be cool. So that's a way of saying I've loved every part of my career as well, by the way.
Yeah, there's a lot to love. I don't blame you. Now I'm going to hit you with a really tough question. Look at that smile on Tank's face. I got the same smile.
Look at that mustache. That is like, you would think it's Movember, right?
I know.
Always November with me, baby.
I look horrible with the mustache. You don't want to see me with the mustache. It's a disaster. Now you're going to answer the toughest question of the night, Chief, and Tank, you're witnessing this. Fourth, favorite bar or restaurant in New York City? How do you like them apples?
Oh, man. So I'm a pretty big pizza fan.
Let's go. Come on.
Right? So I'm gonna have to go with Coronet Pizza in Manhattan, on the Upper West Side, 113th Street and Broadway. I love that pizza place. And you know what? I'll give you a bonus pizza place. I'm gonna go with New Park Pizza in Queens on Cross Bay Boulevard.
Okay, there you go. We have to try it out.
Yeah, two outstanding pizza places. It's both very good. The New Park is a thinner crust pizza, and the Coronet Pizza is the largest slice that you will ever see or have.
You got to come down to New Haven and try out Sally's or Frank Pepe's if you haven't already, or even York.
I've had Frank Pepe's, but it's good.
It's
he said
it's all right. It's just okay.
If I'm on a road trip, it'll do. He said.
Elitist.
I had that. It is good. Yeah, it is good. But it's I'm still standing by my New York favorites.
No, you should. You should. New York pizza's great too. Listen, pizza's pizza, but New York pizza, I've tried it myself. Brilliant. But those two locations you mentioned, I'm definitely going to have to get to at some point during my many visits to the city. And fifth and finally, let's say you get somebody that just graduated from the latest academy class. They're now a Proby firefighter on the job. If you could pull them to the side, give them a little tidbits based off the experiences that you have had, what advice would you give a young firefighter coming on the job now?
Read something fire-related every day, every tour, or listen to something. There's so many things that you can do. If you do that, you'll have a great long career. And love the job; it will love you back. I absolutely love the job. I love the people that I've worked with. Surround yourself with good people who think like you, and and love the job like you do. And man, you'll do good. You'll do good things.
Absolutely. I love it. Before we say goodbye and stick around, we'll say our goodbyes off the air, gentlemen. Is there any shout outs to anyone or anything that you'd like to give, Chief?
My man Tank, who's there already, but it's just all the people that are watching in there. I'm familiar with a lot of the names. I've tried to keep up with it, but it's impossible. So if I start mentioning people, I'll forget somebody. So I appreciate the opportunity, but I got my man Tank here. I got you here. Life is good, my brothers.
We blessed few. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. Seconded to both of you gentlemen. Thank you, Chief. Like I said, stick around. We'll say our goodbyes off the air. Thank you, as always, the chat. And same thing, it's kind of hard for me to keep track of the guests and keep track of the chat. So if I missed you guys by any chance, I really do apologize. But you know I appreciate every single one of you for always being here. I'm still a little rusty. I'm still finding my footing. It's my second show back, but you guys are always a good and patient audience. Coming up next on the Mike the New Haven podcast, he started out in the New York City Housing Police, and when they formed their emergency rescue unit in 1993, was a charter member of that. Later went out to the NYPD Emergency Service Unit, and he thought, you know what, this is a little too chaotic for me. I'm going to go somewhere quieter. So in 2002, he went to this little unit called the Bomb Squad, where nothing ever happens, right, in New York City with bombs. So his name is Steve Lanos, and he'll join me for my NYPD Bomb Squad miniseries, which is volume 34 of Tales from the Boom Room, profiles of the NYPD's arson, explosion, and bomb squad. That's this Friday at 7 p.m. with Detective Lanos. In the meantime, on behalf of Tank Morris and current FDNY Chief of Safety, Frank Leeb, this has been volume 37 of The Best of the Bravest. I'm Mike Colón, and we will see you next time. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your night.